The great hall of the Nightclaw Kingdom was carved from silver stone and lit by 100 floating lanterns. On this night, every noble in the land had gathered, for the moon goddess was about to reveal the fated mate of their ruler. Alpha King Draven Nightclaw sat upon his high throne, tall and proud, his dark eyes sweeping across the crowd. He was the strongest wolf in 3 kingdoms, and he had waited many years to learn who the goddess had chosen for him. A soft silver light drifted down from the domed ceiling. It floated across the sea of faces, and the whole hall held its breath. The light moved past the grand ladies in their fine gowns, past the powerful warriors, and finally settled upon a small figure standing near the servants' door. It was a young woman, with plain brown hair and simple clothes. Her name was Ilara, and she was human. She had no wolf inside her, no fangs, no glowing eyes. She was only a girl who had come to the palace looking for honest work. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the laughter began. It started as a whisper and grew into a roar that shook the lanterns. The king rose from his throne, and his face was hard as stone. "A human," he said, his voice cold and clear. "The goddess has made a mistake. My mate cannot be a fragile human who would break at the first sign of trouble." Ilara stood very still, her heart pounded, but she did not lower her eyes. She looked directly at the king, and something in her steady gaze made him pause. "You will not be my queen," Draven continued. "A queen must be strong. She must command respect. You are none of these things, but I am not cruel. You may stay in the palace as a servant. That is all you deserve." The nobles laughed again, louder this time. A lady in a golden dress covered her mouth and giggled. A warrior slapped his knee. Ilara felt the shame wash over her like cold water, but she did not cry. She simply bowed her head, turned, and walked back through the servants' door with her shoulders straight. What the king did not know, and what none of them could see, was that Ilara was far more than she appeared. Years before, when she was only a small child, her village had been struck by a terrible flood. Her parents were lost, and she was left alone in the world. She had been found by a quiet old woman named Mira, who belonged to a hidden order of humans. This order did not fear the shifters. Instead, they had spent generations learning everything about them. They studied how wolves moved, how they thought, and how they fought. They learned to read the tiny signals in a wolf's body just before it struck. Most of all, they learned patience, balance, and the discipline of the mind. Mira had raised Ilara and trained her in these ancient ways. Ilara had spent countless mornings practicing footwork until her legs ached. She had learned to stay calm when others panicked. She had learned that true strength did not always roar. Sometimes it waited quietly, watching, until the right moment came. When Mira passed away, she told Ilara one last thing. "Go into the world," she said softly. "One day you will find where you belong, and you will show them what strength truly means." So Ilara had come to the palace, never dreaming she would be named the mate of the king himself. Now, as she scrubbed floors and carried heavy trays, she kept her eyes and ears open. She watched everything, and what she saw worried her. The kingdom was not as peaceful as it seemed. 3 powerful alphas from distant lands had begun to visit the court more often. There was Kaine, of the Iron Fang pack, a giant of a man with arms like tree trunks. There was Voss of the Blood Moon pack, quick and sly, with a smile that never reached his eyes. And there was Ragnar, of the Shattered Peaks, the oldest and most dangerous of the 3, whose reputation for cruelty stretched across the mountains. Ilara noticed the way these 3 whispered together in the corners of the hall. She noticed how their eyes lingered on the throne, and she understood, with a sinking feeling, what they were planning. They believed the king was weak. They believed a ruler who could be tricked by a false mate, a ruler distracted and uncertain, was a ruler ready to fall. Days passed, and the tension in the palace grew thicker. Ilara wished she could warn the king, but who would listen to a human servant? So she kept watching, kept learning their habits, and waited. Then, one grey morning, the 3 alphas came before the throne together. The great hall filled with nobles once more, sensing that something important was about to happen. Kaine stepped forward first, his heavy boots echoing on the stone. "Alpha King Draven," he said in a booming voice. We have come to speak the truth that all can see. You are no longer fit to rule. A true king would never be shamed by a broken bond. We invoke the ancient right of combat. We challenge you for the throne. The hall gasped. Voss and Ragnar moved to stand beside Cain, and together the three of them looked like a storm about to break. King Draven rose slowly. His face showed no fear, but Elara, watching from the side of the room, saw the weight in his shoulders. To fight 3 alphas alone was almost certain defeat. Yet if he refused, the kingdom would fall into war, and countless innocent people would suffer. I accept, Draven said quietly. I will fight all 3 of you, but I fight alone, and when I fall, you will spare my people. That is my only condition. Ragnar smiled a slow, cruel smile. Agreed. The nobles murmured in fear. They loved their king, but they knew the odds. 3 against 1 was no true contest. Some of the ladies began to weep. It was then that Elara stepped out from the shadows. She walked to the center of the great hall, her simple clothes plain against the fine gowns and armor around her. Every eye turned toward her, and a ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. There is another law, Elara said. Her voice was calm and clear, and it carried to every corner of the room. An old law, older than any of you. It says that a mate may fight in the place of a king. I am the king's mate, chosen by the goddess herself. I claim that right. I will fight in his stead. For a heartbeat, there was total silence. Then the laughter returned, harder and crueler than before. Kaine threw back his head and roared with amusement. Voss wiped a tear from his eye. Even King Draven stared at her in disbelief. You? The king said, you are a human. You will be crushed. I forbid it. Elara turned to face him, and her eyes held his. You told me a queen must be strong, she said softly. You told me she must command respect. You said I was none of these things. Let me show you the truth, Draven. Not with words, but with deeds. The king opened his mouth to argue, but something in her steady gaze stopped him. Perhaps it was the memory of how she had stood tall while the whole court laughed at her. Perhaps it was a flicker of doubt in his own heart. Slowly, he closed his mouth and gave a single, uncertain nod. Ragnar shrugged. Let the human fight, then. It will make no difference. Cain, you first. End this quickly. Cain stepped into the open circle at the center of the hall, cracking his enormous knuckles. He was twice Elara's size, and he grinned down at her, as if she were a joke. I will try to be gentle, he said, and the nobles laughed. But Elara did not laugh, and she did not run. She stood loose and ready, her weight balanced on the balls of her feet, exactly as Mira had taught her. She watched Caine's shoulders, his hips, his eyes, and when he lunged forward with a mighty swing, she was already moving. She did not meet his strength with her own. That would have been foolish. Instead, she stepped aside at the last possible moment and used his own weight against him. His huge body sailed past her and crashed into the stone floor with a thunderous boom. Before he could rise, Elara had moved behind him, using a clever hold that Mira had shown her, a technique that used balance and leverage rather than raw power. No matter how Cain struggled, he could not break free. His great strength meant nothing when he could not aim it. The hall fell silent. Cain, red-faced and furious, finally slapped the ground in surrender. Elara released him and stepped back, breathing steadily. The nobles stared, their mouths open. Voss was not laughing now. He slipped into the circle, quick and careful. Luck, he hissed. Nothing more. I am faster than any wolf you have ever seen. You will not touch me. He was fast. He darted left and right, circling her like a shadow, trying to confuse her eyes. But Elara did not chase him. She stayed calm at the center, turning slowly, watching the small signs that came before each strike. Mira's voice echoed in her memory. The body always tells you what it will do, a moment before it does it. Learn to read that moment. When Voss finally struck, aiming to knock her off her feet, Elara was ready. She had seen the flick of his gaze, the tension in his leg. She stepped inside his rush, caught his arm, and guided him off balance. He stumbled, spun, and fell hard. Twice more he attacked, and twice more she read him and turned his speed against him. At last, dizzy and defeated, Voss dropped to one knee and raised his hand in surrender. Now only Ragnar remained. The oldest Alpha did not smile anymore. He studied Elara with sharp, careful eyes, and for the first time, he looked at her as a real opponent. "You are clever, human," he said, "but cleverness will not save you from me. I have fought 100 battles, and I have never lost." He was, without doubt, the strongest and most skilled of the three. When he came at her, he did not rush blindly like Kaine, nor dance foolishly like Voss. He came with patience and purpose, testing her, pressing her, forcing her back step by step. Elara felt the difference at once. This was a true fight. For long, tense minutes, the two of them moved around the circle. Elara defended, dodged, and gave ground when she had to. She could not overpower him, and they both knew it. Sweat ran down her face. Her arms grew tired. Ragnar's confidence grew with each passing moment. "You are strong for a human," he admitted, "but you are only human. You cannot last forever." And there, in his words, Elara found her answer. Ragnar was certain of his victory. That certainty was his weakness. Mira had taught her that a proud opponent grows careless the moment he believes he has already won. So Elara did something unexpected. She let herself stumble, just slightly, as if her strength were finally failing. Ragnar's eyes lit up. Believing his moment had come, he threw all of his power into one final, crushing move, holding nothing back. That was exactly what Elara had waited for. In the instant he committed everything to his attack, he left himself open. She twisted away from his overreaching strike, slipped past his guard, and used the same balance and leverage that had felled the others. Ragnar, who had put all his weight into a single blow, could not stop himself. His own force carried him forward and down, and Elara guided him to the floor with a firm, controlled hold. The mighty Ragnar, who had never lost a battle, lay pinned before the royal throne, unable to move. The old warrior stared up at the plain human woman above him, and slowly, a look of true respect crossed his scarred face. "I yield," he said. "I have never seen such skill." Elara released him and rose to her feet. She stood at the center of the great hall, tired but unbroken, and she looked around at the sea of faces. The laughter was gone. In its place was awe, and something deeper, respect. 3 alphas had fallen, not to claws or fangs, not to magic or brute force, but to discipline, courage, and a calm and steady heart. The hall was silent as King Draven descended from his throne. He crossed the floor slowly and stopped before her. Then, to the shock of every noble present, the Alpha King knelt. "I was wrong," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "I judged you by what my eyes could see, and I saw nothing. I mocked you before all my people. I called you weak. But you are the strongest person I have ever known. True strength was never about fangs or claws. It was about the heart, and yours is greater than mine." Elara looked down at him, and she did not gloat. There was no cruelty in her, even now. "Your words hurt me deeply, Draven," she said gently. "When you laughed at me, when you sent me away to scrub your floors, I felt very alone. I did not fight today to shame you. I fought to protect this kingdom, and to protect you. Because whether you accepted it or not, the goddess bound us together." The king bowed his head. "Then let me accept it now, freely and with an open heart, not because the goddess commands it, but because I have seen who you truly are." He rose to his feet and turned to face his court. "Hear me," he called out. "This woman is no servant. She is my equal, my chosen mate, and your true queen. Any who mock her, mock me." For a moment, the hall was still. Then, one by one, the nobles began to kneel. Kain, Voss, and Ragnar knelt too, honoring the human who had defeated them fairly. Soon the entire hall, the same crowd that had laughed at her, bowed low before Elara. She stood among them, this ordinary girl who had lost everything as a child, who had been trained by a wise old woman, who had waited so patiently for her moment. And she understood, at last, what Mira had meant all those years ago. Worth is not measured by what others expect of us. Respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned. And love, true love, is not given because of what we are on the outside, but because of the strength and kindness we carry within. Elara reached out and took Draven's hand. The kingdom that had once laughed now stood proud to call her their queen, and from that day forward the Nightclaw kingdom was ruled not by fear or force, but by courage, wisdom, and a heart that had never once given up.